Welcome to No Longer Conformed. I'm Erik Garthe, and we are studying the book of Philippians, Bondservants of Jesus Christ. In this session, we'll be looking at Philippians chapter 1, verses 27 to 30, the subject of persecution. Let's look at those verses. Only let your conduct, Philippians 1:27, only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel, and not in any way terrified by your adversaries, which is to them a proof of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that from God. But to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me, and now here is in me. What is the subject of these verses? Well, it's suffering for Jesus Christ. Paul addressed three issues regarding persecution. Let's take a look at each one of them. First, the conduct of Christians in suffering. Verse 27, only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. Worthy of the gospel. Believers are to have integrity, meaning they are to live what they believe, teach and preach. Integrity pictures a soundness of moral character, being consistent. A Christian's life must be representative of his profession, whether anyone's watching or not. Jesus is always looking. Some Christians live two very different lives, one in church, spiritual, and another out of church, carnal. What is the testimony of your life away from church? He says one spirit with one mind. This phrase introduces Paul's concern for unity. Paul changed the metaphor in this verse from that of a soldier standing at his post, stand fast, to one of an athletic team struggling for victory against a common foe, striving together for the faith of the gospel. Second, the courage of Christians in suffering. Verse 28, and not in any way terrified by your adversaries, which is to them a proof of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that from God. Proof of perdition. What does that phrase mean? When believers willingly suffer without being terrified, it is a sign that God's enemies will be destroyed and eternally lost. What's the greatest hindrance to Christians witnessing? Well, fear. Fear of what? Well, fear of rejection. Persecution is the ultimate rejection. Paul tells us not to be afraid, no matter what opposition comes to us. Why? Well, persecution reveals two facts. One, that those opposing the gospel of Christ are evil, and two, that those opposed are sincere in their commitment. Suffering for the gospel is a pretty good sign that we've engaged the enemy. It is suffering for the cause of Jesus Christ. Look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with godly fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky, and multitude innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac your seed shall be called, concluding that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and worshipped, leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel, and gave instructions concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he looked to the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, but he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest they were destroyed, lest he who destroyed the firstborn would touch them. By faith they passed through the sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians, attempting to do so, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourging, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth, and all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, God having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Third, the calling of Christians in suffering. Verses 29 and 30. For to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me, and now here is in me. Granted it's a Greek verb that comes from the same word as the Greek noun translated grace. To believe in him. Faith is a gift of God. To suffer for his sake. Suffering is also a gift of God. Suffering loss and reproach is a great honor of Jesus Christ, but only if we behave like martyrs. It's not only the suffering that makes martyrs, it's also about the cause, the spirit, because some Christians rebel amid suffering. The fires of Smithfield under Bloody Mary, there were about 300 victims. 1/3 of them were clergy, another 20% were women. Most famous were the bishops Latimer, Ridley, and Kramer. Latimer said, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as I trust shall never be put out." Let me ask you, are you willing to suffer persecution for Jesus Christ? Are you willing to suffer persecution for Jesus Christ? You think about and you answer that question, and you have a great day.